Thank you, Mr. President. Hello, everybody, dear friends and partners of the initiative, dear excellencies, dear colleagues. I would like to give just 2 minutes, a little overview about the things that were going on in terms of research since the launch of the initiative. So, I have Next slide. Oh. Oh. Mais c'est pas le bon. So there's some problems with the fichier. Okay, so since the launch of the initiative, it is really now underway. Next slide, please. I have, okay. First of all, I would like to point out that there was really increasing awareness of soil carbon sequestration in the scientific community since the launch of this initiative. In particular, there was really a scientific debate going on about the feasibility and the impacts that this initiative may have. Also, as Eduardo also already presented, there was the Global Carbon Meeting organized in Rome by FAO. We had a stakeholder meeting on in the vision of the initiative in Chantilly, France. At the Rossumsted Soil Carbon Conference, we had several talks about the initiative, and also there were these international projects launched towards the goals of the initiative. With regards to our work in the STC, so we were established at the last COP in Marrakech. We are 14 members from all over the world, as Paul already mentioned. We elected a chair, this is myself, and 3 vice chairs, Claire Chenu, Jean-François Susana, and Magali Garcia Cardenas. And our work that we did since the last COP, we had 4 meetings, as Paul mentioned, and we concentrated in particular on the development of indicators for project assessment under the 4 per mil initiatives, and we helped to establish an international research and scientific collaboration program. So as an outcome of our work, which will be presented by Pete and by Claire, we had 2 technical papers, which you have in your material for this meeting. We elaborated assessment procedure and the code of conduct for the submission of the projects under the framework of the initiative. And we participated greatly in the promotion of the initiative. The members participated in several scientific meetings, and also we were authors or co-authors of position papers. Okay, then I can give maybe hand over to Pete.
Thank you, Cornelia. So we have an international research program under the 4 per mil initiative. And you may ask, why do we need a research program? Well, the reason for this is to provide evidence-based options for countries, stakeholders, and the private sector to support the multi-partner initiative. So we feel that all of the decisions that we take and all of the projects that we implement should be science and evidence-based. And we also aim to try to help answer some high-level policy questions that may arise as part of the 4 per mil program. So all of them are action-oriented, and of course we want them to be policy relevant. So in terms of the high-level policy questions, there are national policies such as the nationally determined contributions to the UNFCCC. We want to ensure land degradation neutrality, and of course there are a number of national development programs which we wish to help with. So we want to provide the science basis through the research program to help define mitigation options for mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. We want to define indicators and ways of assessing contributions to food security to improving biodiversity and to underpinning ecosystem services, to quantify how projects or specific interventions also support adaptation, because we're interested in mitigation, but of course adaptation is equally important. And we have a section on monitoring, reporting and verification, where we hope to help to improve greenhouse gas inventories so that the projects that we do on the ground can also be reflected in national inventories that are submitted to the UNFCCC. In terms of implementation, we aim to support the most, to assess the most efficient technical interventions, to assess breakthrough technologies, where there are new technologies becoming available. Also to look at the trade-offs between carbon for soils and other uses. We use the land for other things. It's not just for carbon sequestration, although we may think that. We use it for food production, for fibre production, and for the delivery of many other ecosystem services. We will also aim to study barriers to adoption. So there are many options which we know are cost effective and would benefit the environment and society, and would also be economically beneficial, that aren't yet implemented. So there are some barriers to adoption out there, and we would like to study and help to overcome these barriers, to identify them and to overcome the barriers to adoption. We're also looking at the economics at the farm scale, particularly in terms of benefits to farmers. It will be easier for farmers to implement 4 per mil activities if they also derive an economic or livelihood benefit. We want to help underpin evidence-based policies, and we want to assess scenarios for carbon sequestration implementation. So what would happen when we apply these at the large scale, so that we can work out how much 4 per mil can contribute to our very ambitious climate change targets. There are 4 main themes which I won't dwell upon. I'm not going to go into detail on this. But the first main theme is to estimate the potential for soil carbon sequestration and the associated co-benefits. So this is very much to do with the science of working what works where on different soils and in different climate zones and in different farming systems. The second theme looks at the practices that are adapted to specific conditions. So we do large-scale, regional-scale assessments of what's possible, and then we go and look to see what fits best in a given context. So this is the context specificity. The third pillar is more to do with governance and institutions. So this is to define and strengthen the enabling environment. So even though we know many things are possible, many of them are not yet being implemented, and this often comes down to institutional, social, economic barriers, which are in turn partly related to the institutions and lack of education and many other of these barriers, some of which are to do with governance. So this is maybe bringing in some of the social science community to augment what the natural science community have already done. And the third one is more monitoring, reporting and verification of soil carbon. We want any of the practices that are implemented to be able to be reflected both at the project level and at the national inventory level, so that we can get a good handle on how effective the 4 per mil initiative is being. So I'll just end before I hand over to Claire with just a few examples of international projects which are addressing or contributing to the work. The first one is called SACASA, and you'll see that this is a big project involving institutions which are shown, no, they're not. The institutions which are shown on the right, so a large number of institutions involved in that project, and that's addressing all 4 of the pillars. A project largely based in Africa called SOCA, which is addressing pillars 1, 2 and 4, and a GRA soil carbon sequestration flagship project, again involving a large number of countries, which is largely addressing pillars 1, 2 and 4. So these are just 3 examples of projects which have come along in the last year, which are helping to move forward the research agenda. So the Scientific and Technical Committee does not commission research, it doesn't do its own research, but what it does do is tries to coordinate with some of these international activities so that we can align at the requirements of the 4 per mil initiative with the outcomes of these international projects. So I'll now hand over to Claire.
So good morning, dear friends of the initiative, dear members of the initiative. So it was said several times that it was time for action. And one of our contributions to that and our work towards this was to work on a set of reference criteria and indicators for carbon sequestering projects. So it is meant to support forum members and of course consortium members. And the idea here is to provide to those who are interested a formative assessment, that is to provide advice for the improvement of projects. So this is different from evaluation procedures that you can have, for example, that are given by, provided by funding bodies. So first, what is a project? A project is a specific action that is defined under defined temporal and spatial scales. It can be very local, it can be a national project or an international one. Defined ecosystems can be arable, and you know it's the priority under the 4 per mil initiative, but it's not the only ecosystems that we aim to target, to address. It can also be rangeland, can also be forests. These projects, of course, it's the 4 per mil initiative, so they are targeting retention of carbon or increase in soil carbon. And they are related, and they do that by implementing changes in land management or in land use options. And of course, benefits are expected from these projects, in particular regarding soil carbon, but also there are obviously possible trade-offs for local communities, and these need to be addressed. So how do we envision the process? So this is proposed assessment procedure. So this is a diagram where the forum is not formally represented, but you see different bodies of the consortium itself, the executive secretariat, and the scientific and technical committee. Project holders or funding bodies that want to have opinions on projects may send to the executive secretariat a project description, so project version, given project version. The executive secretariat with handle this project description to the Scientific and Technical Committee. There, the Scientific and Technical Committee aims to provide a formative assessment, and this will be done, as Cornelia presented, following a code of conduct that we have written, and following criteria and indicators. The criteria and indicators, obviously, are related to the goals of the initiative, contributing to food security, attenuating climate change, adaptation to climate change, but also they have to comply. We want them to be in line with the Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN. So the way we see it, that the Scientific and Technical Committee examines the project description. The quality of the project description, of course, will determine also what we can do with it, and we provide a formative assessment. And this formative assessment will go back to the Executive Secretariat, to the project holders, or to the entity that has asked for this formative assessment to be performed. And I put, as you see, I put version 2 of the assessment and of the project, because in case the return is with some negative comments, negative opinions, a negative assessment, then the idea, since the idea is to improve the project holders are invited to submit an improved version of their project so that we can perform a second assessment, hopefully leading to a project that complies the goals of the initiatives and the SDGs. Let's go now more in depth in this assessment. We have defined several categories of criteria, and they will be examined in a sequential manner. First, you have the safeguard criteria that will be examined first. I will define them. Then direct reference criteria, these are the core of the initiative. Then indirect reference criteria, there we deal with the SDGs, and cross-cutting criteria. So what's in there? Step 1, the project has to demonstrate that they do not compromise human rights, children labor, unpaid labor, land grabbing. They do not compromise land rights while land grabbing. They do not compromise poverty alleviation. We attach a lot of importance to this step and to these criteria. We think they have to be put forward. The direct reference criteria are really the core of the initiative. So it's organic carbon stocks and land degradation neutrality, Sustainable Development Goal 15, climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, and contribution to food security. So always related to a sustainable development goal. Then the step 3 is to consider what we name indirect reference criteria, that is contribution to welfare, the impact of the project on welfare and well-being, the impact of the proposed project on biodiversity and ecosystem services that should be maintained or improved, and impact of the project on water, so the resource in quantity, but also in quality, and nutrient cycles that again should be maintained or improved. And further, we want to assess the training and capacity building of the project, and that the project is participatory and socially inclusive, socially inclusive approaches. So how will it go? And this is important. For the first step, the projects need to meet all requirements. It means that if they do not, if the project description does not allow to say that they meet all requirements, the project will be returned back to the project holders with a request for more information or a request to change the project. Now, step 2, the requirements are that soil carbon, there's something positive about soil carbon, that is compared to the baseline, there is less loss of soil carbon, or hopefully that there's an improvement in soil organic carbon stocks, and that the project that is proposed does not compromise other goals, climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, and food security. And accounting for all these steps, when the procedure is at the end, we aim to provide a narrative advice to the project holders that really, again, aims at improving the quality of the project. So this will be done ex ante, that is before the starting of the project or during implementation of the project. We do not aim to assess project at the end. Well, this is not our job. Now let's go a little more in detail in one of the criteria. So, of course, we selected the criteria regarding soil organic carbon stock increase. What we want to say that there are different dimensions that will be considered. Dimensions are the baseline issues. It's not obvious at all. The soil depth to be considered, the time scale, but the time it requires to observe changes, but also the fact that you reach a new plateau and maybe sometimes a saturation capacity, that the storage is reversible, that it can be leakage. There is also issues with additionality of practices that are implemented together, and of the indirect accounting through different methods. The default indicator is a change in soil organic carbon stock per year compared to baseline for the 0 to 30 centimeter depth, and default methods, well, they are out there, that is IPCC Tier 1 to 3, and there are tools that are known, for example, as the EXACT tool that many of you probably know, or validated MRV, measurement verification, reporting and verification methods. And we are absolutely aware that there are associated problems with costs and with frequency of reporting. So I only detail here one of the indicators, but we have done this work for all the indicators proposed. You have that in the leaflet you have in your folder. Now, we wanted, in fact, to promote discussion with you, so we had questions for you. And in fact, what we would like to exchange on with you is, we'd like to know what indicators do you presently use if you are project holders, if you are donors, financiers, or institutions. What are the indicators that you use to assess the impact of a project on soil carbon? And how can this initiative contribute to your needs for the assessments you are doing, if you are a donor or institution, or if you are a project holder? And on it, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and we're looking forward to discussion.
Thank you very much to the three of you for having presented in an integrated manner. So we really see what is the delivery of the scientific and technical committee. Unusually, you ask questions to the audience, and I'm going to open to the audience and asking them, well, if they have also questions. So we'll do a kind of cross-cutting approach. So the floor is open. We have roughly 10 to 15 minutes for questions from the audience and responses to the questions formulated by the panel. I will trigger. Okay, please go ahead. Can please identify yourself?
Thank you. Here's Inga Teiner from the World Future Council, and I have a question about the methodology of weighting between the different criteria. Are you using a point system? What are you envisioning? Thank you.
We'll take several questions and then I'll hand over to you. Yes, please. I'm seeing a hand right on the right. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Henrik Jepsen. I'm with the Danish Ministry of Environment and Food. And since this is the first time we take the floor, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our French colleagues for promoting the initiative and Germany for hosting this meeting. And in October, we hosted actually an EU workshop on climate change mitigation in the agricultural sector. And this workshop very much confirmed that soils are crucial also for food security and other societal goals. So just to underline the importance of what we're discussing here. Thanks. On the criteria, two questions to the panel are, first, it would be good to hear if these proposed criteria somehow reflect safeguards used in other comparable organizations. And secondly, related to environmental safeguards, it seems that environmental services are included in step 3, but they are not included as an actual safeguard in step 1. So just would be useful to hear your thoughts on this because, well, in our view at least, environmental safeguards are very important. Thanks.
Thank you. Stéphane Lefol.
Moi, je n'aurais pas une question à poser, j'aurais simplement à remercier le Conseil scientifique, car la définition des critères était un objet important de l'engagement que nous avions pris à Montpellier, tous ensemble, et que le fait qu'on puisse arriver à organiser une lecture de ce que peut être ou ce que devrait être le stockage de carbone dans les sols avec ses enjeux sociaux, économiques et environnementaux. Et dans les enjeux environnementaux, vous les avez cités à la fois sur l'adaptation, sur la diminution, l'atténuation du réchauffement climatique, sur la question de la biodiversité, il est très important, c'est l'objet du débat qu'on a aujourd'hui, que ces critères soient parfaitement calibrés, définis, et qu'ils permettent à partir de là, à tous ceux qui auront à décider de rentrer dans la mise en œuvre du 4 pour 1000, ils aient une grille de lecture. Donc je le dis vraiment devant tout le monde, ce qui est présenté aujourd'hui est un élément déterminant de la capacité qu'on aura ensuite à passer de la recherche, de la connaissance à l'action. C'est pourquoi je voulais souligner le travail qui a été engagé par le Conseil scientifique.
Okay, thank you. Now, you have the floor for the responses. Please. The first question was on the weight of the indicators. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the questions. First, well, Peter is going to come, we're going to answer together. I would like to just say, maybe we didn't explain the procedure. We are proposing this framework, and the consortium is going to, it will be submitted to the consortium this afternoon. So it's not yet approved by the consortium. And I think regarding the fact that we need a solid set of criteria and indicators, we are envisioning as step 2 to test our present framework on a small number of projects, and we have defined the criteria of the selection of these projects, small ones, big ones, private ones, public ones, and to do that in collaboration with project holders in order to test whether it works and whether it is usable by the potential users. So maybe now I will, and we can answer.
So on the first question about the weighting between the different indicators, there is no weighting, and that's because we're not evaluating projects and saying yes or no. What we're doing is trying to provide a formative assessment. So we say it's strong on this criteria, or it's weak on that criteria, or maybe you could go away and write some more text to demonstrate that you've met this criteria. So it's a formative assessment because the donors will be doing their own evaluation. We don't want to duplicate that work. We want to help the projects as they develop get into a really good position before they then go to the donors, or maybe even the donors to come to us to ask what questions they should be asking. So I think it's important for us to work much more closely with the project developers and with the donors to make sure that we're not duplicating work, and that our formative assessment, which is to help get the projects into a good state, where they then go forward, and that's when the evaluation happens and you get the weighting and the yes and the no. But that would differ between donors, I think.
And to complement this, regarding your question why ecosystem services were not safeguards, this has been discussed among us. But if ecosystems or ecosystem services come later, in a sense, in the assessment, but if the project shows negative impact on ecosystem services, it will lead to a negative assessment and request for improvements to the project holders.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes, I see 2 hands raised. These will be the 2 last questions.
Thank you very much for all the preparatory work. My name is Claudia Kammann from Geisenheim University. I would like to ask about the baseline. You said you will set a baseline and compare to it. And the baseline is often so important because if climate is changing, the baseline will change. So my interest would be how are you going to handle that, or what your ideas are toward that? Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Goddard with Global Conservation Agriculture Network. One thing I see in here is that these projects that you're proposing and criteria are to be implemented usually on farms or farmland, and I'd like to see something about the costs that we're expecting of farmers. That should be a criteria. I think it would be helpful in terms of considering the adoption level of these, of what is the public and private benefits. We saw Professor Lau talk briefly about the social cost of carbon, and we often see marginal abatement cost curves of what we need in terms of determining which is the proper policies for changes in soil carbon at the field level. I think that would be important to have in your criteria and help inform policy formation. Also inform the social cost of carbon and enlighten a bit of the ecosystem services that you're talking about, and what is the value to farmers, what is the value to public, and opening up that topic of payment for ecosystem services, because you're asking landowners to do something at their cost or for free. And I think we need to at least value what that is to both parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these 2 questions, which are related to the questions that you asked. So please.
Okay. So the first one about the baselines, that's very important. I mean, a project intervention which stops a carbon stock that's declining very, very rapidly and just stabilizes it is perhaps equally valuable than a project intervention which raises it. But these are project specific, so I think we cannot define at the outset. There will be many, many different projects which are proposed, and this is something that will be elaborated within the project proposals. So we'll have a project which says we're going to stop this decline, or we'll have maybe another project which says we're going to increase soil carbon. So that's something that we would assess, but the baseline would need to be provided within the project. That's not something that we can prescribe as an STC. And a little bit on the second one, I think that's also related to the project. So when proposing a project, for it to be successful, I guess it would need to be, there needs to be a demonstration that it could be implemented in a cost-effective way by the farmers that are part of that project. So it will certainly be something that we will assess, that it's demonstrated that it improves or doesn't impede sustainable rural livelihoods. But again, it's not for us to prescribe exactly what that would be. That's up for the projects to demonstrate those aspects within it, and then we would assess it and say whether we think the evidence that's provided is strong enough or whether it could be enhanced.
Yeah.